All right. Thank you for joining me for this workshop on plagiarism and paraphrasing. So we're just going to see if anybody else is going to turn up, and then we will start. All right. So thank you for joining me there, guys. So the main idea of our lesson today is going to be paraphrasing. So this is something that will be very useful for you throughout your time here at Elizabeth School of London. Okay, so let's begin with a good question then. What actually is paraphrasing? So have a little think. So what is it? Why do we use it? So the definition then of paraphrasing is taking somebody else's ideas or words and then expressing them in your own words while still keeping the original idea. Okay, so you're not changing the idea at all, you're just changing how the words are used to describe it. So a similar idea, a connected idea, is synonyms. Okay, so synonyms are a way in which we can paraphrase. So synonyms are words that have the same meaning, but of course they are different words. Okay, so let's maybe look at an example then. So here we have the word intelligent. So can you think of any words that have the same meaning as intelligent, but they are different? Okay, so take maybe a minute or so to think about it, and then we'll look at some possible synonyms for it. Okay, so I'm sure you've got some great ideas there that you've written down. So let's have a look at some examples then. So the synonyms we could have had are clever. So I'm sure that a few of you had that option. Okay, smart as well. Then we've got maybe a slightly more complex word here, astute. And then we also have bright. So look at your answers. Did you have all of them? Did you have something different? Hopefully you did. Okay. So another activity for you to do now. On the screen here, we've got 5 words that you may be using during your academic journey here at Elizabeth School of London. So we've got profitable, cost-effective, innovation, collaboration, and leadership. So all nice, useful words for you to use. So I want you to think about how many synonyms can you get for these words? So for profitable, what could be another word that has a similar meaning? Okay. So you might be able to find quite a few. So I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes. You can either use the ideas from your head, or as some people do, they use our good friend Google to help them, or even a dictionary or a thesaurus, they could help. So take a couple of minutes, write down your ideas, and then we will have a look at some possible answers. Okie dokie. So I'm sure you wrote a lot of ideas down. So let's see what options we could have. Okay, so for the first one, we had profitable. So we've got the options here of lucrative, advantageous, and beneficial. Okay, so hopefully you all got those ones. So the next one was cost effective. So it could be economical, efficient, affordable, budget friendly. Did you get all of those, or did you get something different? That'd be interesting to see. Okay, for number three, we had innovation. So synonyms we could have here are invention, creativity, advancement, and breakthrough. On to number four, we had collaboration. So a few different options here. We could have cooperation, partnership, teamwork, and alliance. And then for number five, we had leadership. How many options did you have here? It'd be interesting to know. Some possible options, though, are guidance, direction, command, and authority. So there isn't just one synonym for these words. Remember, there are lots of synonyms that we can use. So when you are writing or when you're giving your presentations, make sure that you use different synonyms so that your work is not repetitive. Okay, so if you ever have some issues with thinking about synonyms for these words, you may want to use a thesaurus. So remember, a thesaurus is a dictionary that gives you similar words. Right? So words with similar meanings, of course. So one particular resource you might like to use is thesaurus.com. So if you type in a word there, it will give you options of other words that have similar meanings. Okay. So let's think about paraphrasing in general then. Okay. So as we looked at before, when we are paraphrasing, we take other people's ideas, we change the words so that it's not repetitive, but we still keep the same idea. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the process of how we do this. And in general, it is a 6-stage process. So the first part we need to do is have a look at the original text. So it could be a book, an article, things like that. So read the original text carefully and make sure that you really do understand what the main idea of the text is. Okay. If you don't know that, then you can't really do any of the other steps. Okay, so make sure you understand it first of all. So in the next step, what you should then do is put that original text aside. So you read the book, so close the book, put it away. You read the article, close the tab on the computer, and then see if you can, in your own words, write out what was the main idea. Okay. If you can't remember what the main idea was, or if you don't understand what the main idea was, then you really have to go back to the first point. Okay. So only when you really understand what the main thrust of the idea is, that's when you write it in your own words. Okay. So quite easy so far. So after that, what you want to do then is compare it with the original and see if you still have the same meaning. Okay. If you've changed the meaning, then your paraphrasing has gone wrong. Okay. All right. So when you are comparing it to the original, make sure you do a little bit of editing. Make sure that it is still clear and still coherent. Okay. And then compare it with the original text again to see if it is accurate. And another very important step, the last step, is you'll need to make sure that you have referenced the text that you originally looked at. It is perfectly okay for you to paraphrase the idea, but you still need to reference it. Okay. If you paraphrase without reference, then you run the risk of being accused of plagiarism. Okay. And plagiarism is something that you don't want to be accused of. So paraphrase, yes, but you always need to reference no matter what you do. Okay. So we just mentioned plagiarism. So let's make sure that we really understand what we mean by plagiarism and how we can also avoid it. So have a little think. Maybe you've heard of this before from some of the other workshops. So have a little think. What is the definition of plagiarism? Okay, you've got about a minute to think about it, and then we'll have on screen the definition. Thanks for looking up the meaning there. So it should have been something like taking someone else's ideas, their own ideas, and then describing them as if they are your own without giving them a proper acknowledgement or credit for it. Okay. Because that person who wrote the book or wrote the article has probably put in years of research to produce it, so they deserve some credit for the work that they have done. Okay. I'm sure you would be very angry if someone else took your work and said that it was theirs. You would, of course, want some credit for it. Okay. So we should always try to do this wherever we are on our academic journey. So there are different types of plagiarism. Okay. So let's imagine about what they could be. Okay. So the first one is called verbatim copying. So this is where you directly quote someone else's words, but you don't give that person credit. Okay. So this is the most obvious type of plagiarism, and it can get you in very big trouble if you do this. Okay. So it is possible to quote someone word for word exactly, but as we've mentioned before, you definitely need to reference them. So another type of plagiarism is inadequate paraphrasing. So some people believe that if you take the other person's idea and change the words, that you don't then need to reference that person. But because you have taken their idea, you still need to reference. It doesn't matter if you change the words or change the structure, they still need to be referenced. Okay, so that is still seen as a type of plagiarism or cheating, in other words. All right, another type of plagiarism is mosaic plagiarism. This is when you take words and phrases from different sources. So maybe you take an idea from one uh, theorist, one academic, and another sentence from another person, and then from another person, and put them all together, and you don't provide any references from all of those people. Okay? Just because you have taken ideas from lots of people, it doesn't mean that you don't have to reference them. Of course you do. You have to provide more references for all of those people. Okay? So the general rule is if it's not your idea, you need to reference. Okay. So we touched on it slightly that plagiarism is a big deal. So what do you think could be some of the consequences if you plagiarize someone else's work? Okay, there can be some very, very serious ones. So let's have a look at them now. Okay, so one of the first ones that we can have is it says here that you could face disciplinary action. So obviously you would fail that assignment. It can also be more serious than that. You can fail the course that you are on. You may need to retake a year, or even more seriously than that, you may be kicked out of the institution that you are at. All right, so you can imagine that is a very serious one. That's a waste of money, waste of time, waste of energy. Okay, so don't plagiarize. Reference as always. Okay, but it can get more serious than that. Maybe you think that's the end of it, but no, there is a second stage. All right, so what can happen is you can have damage to your reputation. If you plagiarize, if you cheat, then other people will know about this and they don't want to work with you anymore. It may be difficult to get another job. It may be difficult to study at another institution. Okay. All right. So just don't do it. Now, the last one is possibly the most serious one, and that could be legal consequences. Okay. If you use someone else's work, this then involves copyright and things like that. So you may face legal consequences and also monetary consequences as well. You may need to pay fines or things like that. So, as always, don't plagiarize, reference your work, and then everything will be okay. Hey. So, these are some of the possible consequences here on the screen. So, there are some very famous people here who did plagiarize and then they had their consequences. So it could be losing your job, having to resign, or in other situations, you may be accused of plagiarism and you have to defend yourself. Okay. All right. So other people have done it, and the problem is that you will always be found out. So remember, when you submit any assignments, they go through a computer filter, and that filter can tell your lecturer or your marker how much of your work has been plagiarized as a percentage. Okay. So we always know when you are plagiarizing. So just don't do it. All right. So we've talked about paraphrasing. We've talked about plagiarism. And paraphrasing is a way that can help us avoid plagiarism. But there is kind of a thin line between the two, and we need to make sure that we're always on the right side of it. So there is a scenario here on the screen. So have a little think about it and then read it and then decide for yourself whether you think this is plagiarism or whether this is an acceptable type of paraphrasing. Okay. So a student has rephrased a paragraph from a book, but they haven't cited it. They haven't provided a reference. So what do you think? Is this plagiarism? Or is this paraphrasing, but in an acceptable form? Okay, so hopefully everybody who's watching this has decided that it is plagiarism, because it is. Because there is no citation, yeah, it would be a form of plagiarism. Okay, so the idea again is to avoid repeating myself, always provide a proper citation. All right, so another activity for you to do now. On the screen, we have a sentence. So let's imagine that this has come from a book or an article or something like that, and you want to include this idea in your assignment. However, you want to change the words around a little bit. So this is the sentence. You've got a couple of minutes now. I want you to paraphrase this sentence. Okay. There are some words here that can't be paraphrased. You know, supply chain management. This is a concept. This is a crucial concept in the sentence. You shouldn't change it. Okay. But pretty much everything else here in the sentence can be paraphrased. Good could be changed to something else. Really important could be changed to something else. So write down your ideas and then soon we'll have a look at it at an example sentence. Okay. So I wish I could see your answers. I'm sure that you've got some really good ones. But one example here is on the screen. Okay, so it keeps the original idea. We've changed things around a tiny bit, but we've mostly paraphrased it in a good way. Okay, so supply chain management stays the same, but good has been changed to effective. Okay, really important has changed to crucial. Okay, companies we've changed to those. Okay, so we got a referencing tool there. Stay relevant has changed to maintain the competitiveness. World market to global market, and nowadays to today. So if you have a look at it again, it retains the original idea, but the words are all a little bit different. Okay, so another chance here for you to paraphrase. So we've got another sentence here. Digital platforms offer a range of opportunities for businesses to engage with consumers. So I'm sure you'll agree. Good sentence there. So you need to paraphrase this one. Okay, so again, a couple of minutes, write down your idea. We'll have a look at your ideas and then another example sentence. Okay, thanks for that then. So let's have a look at one possible example sentence then. Okay, so we got here digital platforms present organizations with numerous opportunities to interact with their customers. So again, this is an accurate description of the idea in the original, but we've changed a couple of things around and the words are a bit different. So digital platform stays the same because that is the main concept of the sentence. Okay, offer has changed to present. Um, range has gone to numerous. Opportunity stays the same. That's okay. Businesses has changed to organizations. Engage with has changed to interact with. And consumers has changed to customers. Okay, so I hope you agree. Similar ideas, but different words. Okay, so those are the ways that paraphrasing can be done well. But sometimes paraphrasing can be done badly. And that's because sometimes it seems like words have a similar meaning, but they are not exactly the same. And if they are not exactly the same, then it doesn't give exactly the same idea as was in your original. So if you don't give the same idea as the original, then it may seem like you have changed the idea. Okay, so always be careful about the synonyms that you use because it might not have exactly the same meaning. And there is an example here on the screen regarding this. Okay, so let's imagine our sentence was the project deadline was postponed. And then someone has paraphrased it to the project deadline was delayed. So postponed and delayed are in a similar place, but they are not exactly the same. Okay. If something is delayed, maybe this was by, 30 minutes, an hour, something like that. But postponed means that it was put back to a later date, maybe. Okay, maybe next week or a couple of weeks later. So if if that was the paraphrasing, that isn't the exact same idea. Okay. And if you don't give the same idea, then there's no reason for you to quote that thing. Okay. Another example here on the screen. Okay. So the original was the partnership between the two firms dissolved due to conflicting interests. And then the incorrect paraphrasing was the partnership between the two firms disintegrated due to conflicting interests. So This person has paraphrased dissolved to disintegrated. Now, it seems like they have the same meaning. And in general, it's close, but it's not exactly the same. And because it's not exactly the same, it's not a paraphrasing. Okay? Because dissolved has the idea of it being formal or legal, whereas disintegrated has more of a negative feeling about it being falling apart or breaking. Okay? So for us to have the correct idea, it would have to have this idea of being dissolved, okay, without this kind of emotional description of disintegrate. Okay, so just to repeat ourselves here, it must have the exact same meaning as the original idea. Okay, so the only way we can really get better at paraphrasing is through practice. So my suggestion to you would be try to do this as a routine every day if you can. So maybe have a look at a news article in the morning, maybe take the headline or the first couple of sentences, read it, make sure you understand it, write, so, hide it, put it away, write your own sentence or description of it from your own brain and with your own ideas, and then compare it with the original. Okay. It may be that it doesn't look the same at the start, but over time, with more practice, you will build up a bigger database of synonyms in your brain, and then it will become a lot easier over time. Okay. Now, as I said, the first few times it might be difficult, but as we always say, practice makes perfect. And after a while, you will become a master at it. Okay. Um, and do remember to have a look at a thesaurus. We looked at the URL earlier on. So whenever you do have a look at some synonyms, make sure you write them down and practice them regularly. Okay. Okay, so throughout this presentation, we've talked about how important it is to reference the work that you use. And you can see here on the screen, these are my references for the presentation that I've made today, because it is important. Okay, so thank you for joining me today for this workshop. My name is Kieran. I am from the English Support Department. It's been a pleasure giving this workshop today, and thank you for coming.